Hello and welcome to my kitchen here at Trails N62. I'm going to be doing some Italian meatballs today. Now, if you've seen the previous video on Italian meatball soup, these are the same meatballs. So what I'm going to do, I had some extra, I'm going to can them up. Apparently for that soup, their intention was to make the meatballs bigger, because I had a bunch of meatballs left over after putting the meatballs in my pint and a halves. They called for 6 pints and used 2 pounds of meat, a pound of pork, and a pound of ground beef mixed together, and 3 meatballs per pint, which would have made 18 meatballs, and I had a whole lot more than that left over. So what I thought I would do is to can some Italian meatballs. Now, making of the meatballs process is the same, so if you watched that video, what you're about to see is the same process in making the meatballs. You make the meatballs the same either way. I had a little chicken broth left over from the soup also that I heated up, and then I put my meatballs that were in the refrigerator, I put them in there to warm them up. So I'm going to do pints for these meatballs. Part of them I'm going to put the rest of this chicken stock water mixture in that's been salt and peppered. I'm going to put that in to the jar. The other ones I'm going to use tomato juice. That's the Italian meatball soup making right now in the background. So the other ones I'm going to put tomato juice, which is what I do when I can my meatloaf. I use tomato juice for the liquid base. So I'm going to be doing part of them in tomato juice and part of them in what I have left over from this chicken stock. Probably just one in this chicken stock. I think that's about what I've got left. The process you're about to witness is the making of the meatballs is the same as for the Italian meatball soup, and then we go to jar. Now that we have the preliminaries out of the way, let's get started here. Make our meatballs. Now I'm starting with 2 pounds of meat, and I have a pound of hamburger, and I have a pound of ground pork. Now this is not sausage, this is just ground pork, so there is no seasoning in this whatsoever. You can use sausage, ground sausage, if you want to make these. That's okay, just remember it has seasoning in it, so you won't want to put all these seasonings that I'm about to put in here. Now I ground this pork myself. Had a pork butt roast in there that I just sliced the meat off of and ground it up and made my own ground pork. You can buy it ground, you can buy the sausage like I said. Now I'm going to put some spices and stuff in here, some other ingredients to make these meatballs. Okay, I'm going to put in 1 diced onion, medium onion, basically it's diced. A medium diced onion is about a quarter, or about a cup of diced onions. So that's about 1 medium onion. If you like a little more onion, you can put a little more onion in there. If you like a little less onion, you can put a little less onion in there. So I use 1 cup of diced onions, which is about 1 medium onion diced up. Now next I'm going to put something in that is a binder. I generally don't use products like this when I can, especially if I'm doing something raw, but I'm going to be pre-cooking these meatballs, par-cooking them, like I do my meatloaf patties. So I'm going to be using breadcrumbs. In this one you can use oatmeal, but I'm going to use some breadcrumbs. You don't use a lot, and normally you don't, this is not normal canning methods here. But we're going to put the binder in here. That's 1/3 cup of breadcrumbs or oatmeal. Mix that in real good here. That's going to help as a binder to hold your meatballs together so that when you process them, they don't come apart in your soup. And we'll also be putting, we're going to put 1 egg in here. Same thing with the egg. It's not necessarily an approved method for canning like this, except for in small amounts. I do use it in small amounts, and it helps with, again, with the binding process. Now, some recipes call for 2 eggs, but I'm just use 1. I use as few as I possibly need to. When I get this together and start putting it together as meatballs, if I need to add another egg, then I will. But 1 egg I think is going to be enough to get all this put together. Now next I'm going to be adding 2 tablespoons of Parmesan cheese, grated Parmesan cheese. And I don't use real Parmesan cheese. I use the kind you buy in the jar and put it on your pizza and stuff, so it's not fresh grated Parmesan, but it is grated Parmesan. And since I'm a cheapskate, that's what I use. I don't know that I've ever used real grated Parmesan cheese in my life. We'll mix that in here. And then next we're going to be putting in, the recipe actually calls for 1/4 of a bunch of freshly chopped parsley. How much that comes out to in dried parsley, I don't know, but I just added a tablespoon of dried parsley is what I'm putting in here, or 1/4 bunch of freshly chopped parsley. This works for me, so I'm just using the dried parsley. Mix this in, get it all good and mixed in there. Next I'm going to be adding 3 cloves of crushed garlic, but since I don't use fresh garlic either, I'm adding 1½ teaspoons of minced garlic, which is basically the same thing as 3 cloves of garlic. So 1½ teaspoons of minced garlic. Again, work that in really good and work it throughout your meatloaf. Oh, I'm sorry, your meatballs. A little different recipe than the meatloaf, but the concept is the same. We make these meatballs, we'll make them up, we're going to put them on a tray, and then we're going to pre-cook them before we make our soup. Now lastly, I've got some spices that I'm going to be putting in here, and that includes 1/2 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, 2 teaspoons of salt. And I've got all that just right in here. And just sprinkle this on here. And again, I'm going to mix it up with my hand mixer. Now to make my meatballs, I have a little meatball maker. I've got a bigger one, but this is a smaller one. So I simply dip it down in there. And I get it full of the meat. Trim it off the sides. And since I don't have a lot of filler and stuff in these, or binder and stuff in these, then they come out a little rough. And so I just take them and I just roll them into balls here. They're roughly formed and I just roll them. So I've basically got uniform sized meatballs. And I'll get these done. Again, I just get a load of the meat on there and squeeze it. I've got a bigger one of these, and any of these meatballs that I have left over here, I'm just going to can some meatballs. Again, I don't have a lot of binders, so they don't bind perfectly, so I just take them and just roll them together so they'll bind together to form my meatballs. Basically the same size, roughly the same size meatballs that go in. You can see I've got these formed. I've got them on a drip tray so that the oil and the stuff and fat and water and stuff can drip out of it and not be on the meatballs themselves, but drip down into the bottom pan. And these I'm going to be putting in the oven at 375 degrees for about 30 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. I have to keep a check on them. I'm using the time and the temperature that I use for my meatballs to make my meatloaf patties, and I'm going to be using it for these. But since these aren't as big as my meatloaf patties, I may just go a little bit shorter time. My meatballs, and as I said, 375. Now, I did these for 25 minutes. The purpose is to mostly cook them, par cook them. They don't have to be cooked all the way because they will cook some during the canning process. But I was just kind of going on my meatloaf recipe for canned meatloaf, and I do that for 30 minutes. These I did for 25, and this is what I came up with. They're nice and ready to go. Probably the best thing would have been to do them for 20 minutes. Maybe even 15, 17 to 20 minutes probably would have been best. They don't have to be all the way done because they will finish cooking in the canning process. The purpose is to par cook them just like I do hamburgers, so it's mostly cooked so it doesn't clump together in a hard clump and make it too dense to can, which is why when I do hamburger, I par cook the hamburger. Some people do it raw. That's up to them. I don't. So first thing I'm going to do is put in my meatballs. Now I'm using pints. You can do this however you want to. So I'm only going to do 3 pints. That's 9, 10 meatballs per pint. It could probably take more, but there's too much for 2 pints, and so I'm just going to go this way and fill it up with liquid. This one I'm going to do the chicken broth. Again, I'm going to leave an inch headspace. These other 2 I'm going to fill up with tomato juice. Wipe my rims. Next we put our lids on. Rings finger tight. And into the canner. Alright, the meatballs are in the canner. I'm canning them for 75 minutes because they're in pints. Quarts, pint and a half go for 90 minutes. And pints and half pints will go for 75 minutes. So I'll can those for 75 minutes. I've got them going. And we'll have some Italian meatballs ready to go in spaghetti or just to eat as meatballs as a side appetizer. Stick some toothpicks in them for company. They're great little meatballs. You can put them in some sauce if you want to put it in some sauce for meatballs, and they taste pretty good. It's the reason I had fewer than I did, because maybe 2 or 3 of them got ate in the process. It happens. So anyway, got those started. We'll be back when they're done. Alright, Italian meatballs. Canned up, I got 3 pints. canned. I got 2 of them I canned up in tomato juice. And then I have 1 I canned up in the stock that I used for my Italian meatball soup. And like I said, basically the preparation of the meatballs is the same on this as it is for the soup, except I just put the meatballs in the jar, put the stock in it, heated it, put liquid in it, and then canned them. So I'll have some meatballs. I can throw them in with some spaghetti or other pasta, or just put them in a crock pot, let them heat up a little bit, stick toothpicks in them, use them for appetizers, however you want to use them. They're good, and just another thing to have in your pantry. Quick and easy. Appreciate you all watching. From my house to your house. From my kitchen to your kitchen. God bless.